Hey everybody! Today we're going to make substrate, and we're going to make a couple different kinds of substrate because I got some fun stuff happening, and I mostly just have it in me to change things up a little bit, right? All I want to do is make some adjustments to my substrate to see what kind of an impact it'll have on the growing that I normally do. But first, what we're going to do is put together my classic substrate mix, which is just a 2 ingredient, I guess 3 ingredient substrate mix. And those ingredients are organic cocoa coir in a compressed 1.4 pound brick. I get these on Amazon. There's an 8-pack that I pick up for $24. The thing that I like about this most is it doesn't contain anything extra inside of it that you need to worry about. Sometimes cocoa coir bricks will also be fortified with trichoderma and other additives because its primary use, or its largest use commercially, is gardening. And when you're growing a garden, trichoderma is very beneficial to your garden. But as we know, when you are gardening mushrooms, well, trichoderma is the devil. So make sure your coir is not fortified or reinforced or added to by anything. Just pure, unadulterated cocoa coir. It doesn't have to be organic, but this just happens to be the package I've been using for a couple of years, and I love it. It's tried, true, tested, and doing me just fine. The other ingredient that you're gonna need is vermiculite. So I bought these. I got 4 of these bags from HomeDepot.com for like $69. That single bag lasts you a bunch of different grows. It goes a long way because you really only need to use like 2 liters of the vermiculite per each brick of cocoa coir, roughly. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, depending on how much water you put in there and what kind of field capacity you're testing at and everything else. Vermiculite is a moisture remediator, so it holds on to water so that when the mycelium network is forming inside of the bin, it has a constant and consistent place to draw water from as it grows. So that's why we use vermiculite. And the third ingredient is the simplest of all: water. That's it. Cocoa coir, vermiculite, water. Now, a lot of people will add gypsum into their water before they mix it with their cocoa coir. Gypsum offers calcium. That's the only nutrient that it offers, and I'm pretty sure mushrooms don't really need calcium. Not a lot of it. Gypsum also helps to be a moisture retainer and remediator as well, but if you're using the fine-grained vermiculite, you don't really need to add in the gypsum. It's just an unnecessary ingredient. Also, some people are fortifying their substrate with an element called azomite. Azomite is found exclusively in Utah, and it is a chalky earthen material that is naturally fortified with a whole bunch of things that I can't remember right off the top of my head. But I've done probably 3 dozen grows using azomite in my substrate, and I've probably done many other dozens of grows without the azomite in my substrate, and I'll tell you now, I have found 0 difference between the two. So I've just stopped using azomite. So there you have it. Excuse me. Anyway, so when you're mixing your substrate, we're gonna kind of scrunch down here a little bit, and I'm gonna show you guys how I put things together, and you can just go from there. Okay, so one thing that you want to do before you start getting in here, especially with this vermiculite stuff, is you want to mask up. This is some gritty, dusty particulate matter that you just don't want to be breathing in. I mean, it just can't be good for you, right? We weren't meant to breathe dirt. Otherwise, we'd be way different than we are. So glove up, and, just for sake of sterilization and sanitation and everything else, get yourself just as prepared to mix your substrate as you would be prepared to get it on your agar dishes or, mess with your mushroom bins or anything else. Mask up, glove up, and, make sure that you're doing the things to maintain as sterile an environment as possible. So, once you open this up and see what's inside, I want you to reach in and just start breaking it all up, okay? Just do your best to break it up into, an earthen-like material. So you want to get the clumps out. You want to try and work through and make the brick, into dirt, essentially. So dig all the way to the bottom, get all those big clumps, mostly go by feel, but you'll know when it's ready. So what we have here from a single 1.4 pound compressed brick of coco coir is approximately 40% of this bucket that has been filled by that. Maybe 35. So you want to mix in equal parts vermiculite to the coco coir, a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, some people will tell you to measure, and that's fine. You can measure. I don't, but you can. It won't hurt none. For me, what I'm used to is about 2 2/3 of this container, which is an orchid pot, by the way, in there. Because remember, the bucket does get bigger as it comes up. So you have to kind of calculate the mental math to, understand the volume of the vermiculite versus the volume of the coco coir. Either way, this is how much I use. And then, really, you just want to get in here and mix it up. Blend it as best you can to ensure that all of the vermiculite and the coco coir are evenly distributed amongst each other inside of the substrate so that it creates an even cake. That's why we call it a cake, because it's, blended ingredients that we prepare that take on a certain shape. Now, they make tools. You can get a mixer paddle for your drill. I have a drill attachment, but the battery on my drill is dead, so I'm gonna have to do this by hand. But either way, it's not that difficult. You just get in there and go bottom to top, like so. Spin your bucket and keep doing it, just like that, right? And it's gonna get it all mixed up, nice and even, and looking good. Once you're fully blended, and once you're comfortable that you've pulled all of the coconut coir clusters from the crease down where the bottom meets the sides, and everything is blended to your satisfaction, then we're gonna test the field substrate, the field capacity, to make sure that our substrate is what we want for mushroom spawning. So, in order to do that, we're gonna let my forearm rest a second. And then we're gonna grab a handful of the substrate and we're going to squeeze it. And no water came out. So that means we need to add just a little bit of water. For that, I 100% suggest that you use distilled water, which I have right over here behind a bunch of stuff because I didn't think I was going to need it. So, here we go. We're going to pour in about a half a cup, and we're going to mix just like this, just like we did when we first mixed everything together. The hydration from that puddle we poured in will grab and blend all of the things that are surrounding it and touching it to evenly distribute the water inside of the substrate. That's one of the benefits or perks of using the vermiculite, is the moisture retention properties. So we're going to see if a half a cup was just enough to put us over the edge. What we're looking for is that right there. A few drops of water to come out when we squeeze the life out of it. 4 or 5 drops of water that creep out is all you're really looking for. And boom, you are ready to rock with your field capacity hydrated substrate blend. 3 ingredients, just like that. Now, you might be asking yourself, what in the world is that substrate actually going to do? Isn't your substrate part of the nutrients of growing, etc., etc.? No, absolutely not. Your substrate is simply the medium in which, let's back that up a little bit. Your basic substrate is just the medium in which the mycelium can establish its network to produce fruit. The primary nutrition for the mycelium is going to be the grain spawn that you inoculated previous to this step. That's where it's going to get its nutrients from to produce the fruit at the basic level. Again, this is for all of you guys out there who are just starting out. This is a beginner's step. This is before you start thinking about modifying your substrate so that you can try to create a more nutrient-rich environment in which the mycelium can thrive. And that leads us to the other stuff that is here behind me now. So what we've got here is, recently I've grown a little bit too confident in my ability to produce basic grows, and I'm looking to diversify my own skill set a little bit by creating a more nutrient-rich environment in which my mushrooms can thrive. And one of the ways that I'm going to do that, or I guess a couple of the ways that I'm going to do that, is by introducing new ingredients to the substrate. But we got to do some things before we can actually use them. So what you see here in front of me are a couple of pans filled with worm castings. Worm poop. That's all this is. This is earth that has been consumed and turned by earthworms and pooped out at a worm farm. And it is full of all kinds of different nutrients that are going to have, nitrogen and phosphates and, a whole bunch of other stuff that I can't remember right off the top of my head, that is going to help create a more nutrient-rich environment for the mycelium. So it's going to get nutrition from the grain, but it's also going to get nutrition from the environment, from the earth, the substrate that we put it in, just like it would be doing out in the wild. Okay, so we're going to use worm castings. The problem is worm castings are not safe right off the bat. There's all kinds of things going on inside of here that we need to take care of. And the best way to do that is to pasteurize. So the only way that I know that I can pasteurize without a huge tub or a sous vide machine or anything else is to bake these in the oven. I've got the oven preheated to 200 degrees. I'm going to go stick these pans in the oven, and we're going to bake them in there until the internal temperature is 160 degrees. And then we're going to maintain that internal temperature for 30 minutes. And that will take care of all of the nasty critters that are living inside of the worm castings. It will also take care of any worm eggs that might be mixed in with the worm castings, which that is a thing. So I'm going to go get these popped in the oven, and then we'll be back to talk about that. So I'm pretty sure you can all see what that is. That is a small bale of hay, or straw. And I want to bring you down here with me again. Lots of ups and downs here on the channel today. Bring you in nice and close too. Let's get cozy. So what this is right here is straw in a bucket, and so much more. This straw has been in this bucket that I filled with cold water for about 10 days. It smells a little weird, but not that bad. What I'm doing with this is a process called cold fermentation. Wood growers people who grow wood-loving mushrooms know about cold fermentation. Basically, what's happening is the water is soaking into the fibrous materials that is the straw. It is allowing the bacterium that live naturally inside of this environment to eat away at the cellulose on the outside of the straw itself. That consumption process causes the bacteria to live and die, which creates an environment of fermentation, right? And as that happens, every day I come in and I stir this up and I allow the air and the other gases that are released from the dying bacterium to vent into the air, and then I cover it back up. This pre-digestive breakdown process is also an environment that is rich in good bacteria, things that are going to be helpful to the nutrient-dense environment that I'm going to be creating inside of my tubs for the next series of grows. So I'm going to go and dump out this water because 10 days on a cold fermentation is the recommended number of days. I'm going to go dump out this water, and this straw should be ready to use because it should be free of bacteria and other contaminants due to the fermentation process. So I should be able to go straight into my substrate mix with the straw and the worm castings once they're pasteurized, mix it all together, and spawn my tubs. So, big day ahead, a lot of things to do, and, well, I don't know if I'm going to bring you guys along with me for the whole process, or if I'm just going to check back in when the end result is ready to rock. But either way, for now, thanks for hanging out. Okay, we're back, and once again, we are going to mask up and glove up as we start to work with the substrate materials. If you'll remember earlier, we had mixed the classic 3-ingredient substrate in the white bucket over here. Now in this bucket, I've had prepared a brick of cocoa coir already, the same bricks that I always use. And if you'll remember these from earlier, this is a tray of the worm castings that I was pasteurizing. So I'm going to go ahead and mix all this in here. The ratios are something that you're going to have to play with. I've seen a lot of information in a lot of different places, but the overall total of your substrate material should be approximately 30% manure. Now, dumping this in, I can tell you right now that this is definitely not going to be 30% of the overall volume of the substrate. So that's why we did 2 trays of the worm castings. So we're going to add this in as well. And this is kind of dry because it was in the oven for a couple hours, you know, bringing it up to temp, killing off all the bacteria, and, you know, getting itself nice and ready to be used as a substrate. So because it is dry, I'm going to mix it first with the cocoa coir, and then I'm going to come in over the top, and we're going to mix the vermiculite in with it afterwards. But the water from the cocoa coir is going to help to rehydrate the worm castings that dried out during the pasteurization process, and it's going to help me get a cleaner, more blended, earth-like material before I add the moisture remediator, which is, of course, the vermiculite. So, the cool thing about the worm castings is that, theoretically, we're going to get most or all of the benefits of manure without the worry of it smelling kind of bad. I know that old, you know, processed manure does not necessarily smell bad, but I haven't used it yet because I'm a little intimidated by the idea that it might. I don't want my whole house smelling like poo. Now, I was just baking the worm castings at 200 degrees for about 2.5 hours. And let me tell you, couldn't smell a thing. Pulled them out, gave it a whiff, and really it just smelled earthy. That's it. So, all right, I think we're pretty well blended there, and we're ready to add in the vermiculite. So, on top of the vermiculite though, I'm wondering, because I have my straw as well that I've drained, and I want to add straw to this, but I'm not sure if I should do straw first and then vermiculite, or vermiculite first and then straw. I think this time we're going to add the vermiculite first and then the straw, and we'll see how it goes. So, as usual, that's 1, 2, oh man. Tell you what, we're going to do a little less vermiculite since we have more ingredients involved this time. So we're going to go with just 2 of those and see where that gets us. I'm already making a mess over here. So I can tell you guys right now that I may need to adjust either my recipe size or figure out a way to do this in a much larger container so that I can get everything kind of measured and really well blended without making such a huge mess. Man, those worm castings are really changing the consistency in here. I'm definitely noticing a difference as I mix it in just how heavy the mixture is, for one, and how much more difficult it is to hang on to. But nope, not at field capacity, which means we'll be adding a little more water. Now here's the thing to think about. The straw itself is pretty wet. I mean, like, you know, I dumped it out, all the water that I could, but the fibrous material of the straw is still pretty wet. So I don't know what kind of an impact that's going to have on the field capacity of the substrate as a whole. Man, that's hard to get down in there in the cracks. Okay, pretty well blended. So now, let's get in here with the straw. And let me just tell you, I am 42 years old. Kneeling down like this is reminding me that I need to get back into the gym. Okay, here we go. Straw time. Now, you can just hear the water as it runs off of these when I pick them up. We're going to go a couple of good handfuls. That's about 1 liter's worth. Maybe go 1.5 liters. Now, let's see if I can mix this up in this container. I have a feeling that this is going to be really challenging and that I may have to redirect and refocus. Also, this straw smells weird. So that's an interesting thing. Okay. Yeah. This is not working for me. So, and I tore through my gloves. Let me brainstorm this a second and we'll be right back. Well, I don't have anything else available right now that I could pour this into, but I'm thinking a 66 quart tub would probably be a little bit better suited to mixing up a bucket like this, or a substrate like this, maintaining all of the volumes. In fact, it may give you a better idea of how the blend is going so that you could see it evenly as it is spread out over a larger format. So I'm definitely going to do that next time, or I might even put a lid on this. You know what? I'm going to put a lid on it. I'm going to go buy a tub and come back, and we're going to do this together because, well, we've already started. Let's see it through to the end. Okay, I'm back and look at what I got. This is a great big old waterproof gasket tub, 70 freaking 9 quarts. So this is what I'm going to use to mix my new substrate mix all together nice and even. So give me a second to mask up and glove up, and we're going to get back in on this. Okay, so we got the bucket and we got the new tub. So what I'm going to do is basically we're just going to dump this in here so that we can see a little bit better to get it all mixed up nice and well. Because, man, this bucket was just not working. Okay, and you can see some discoloration in there indicating that I had not mixed it as well as I probably should or could have. So this was definitely the right decision as far as new substrate goes. Okay, bucket is emptied out. So now we just need to get this blended up really well and see if the straw and the other ingredients are balanced inside of the substrate. Right? You don't want them to clump together or create clusters so much as you want it to be an even distribution of materials all the way throughout. It's going to create a homogeneous environment in which the substrate or in which the mycelium is going to be successful. And enter the offspring.
What would grocery refer to on this application?
Okay, we're going to pause for a second because we're filling out job applications, so we're going to do that. Stand by. Okay, so sorry about the pause there. While he was talking, I was mixing. I just want to show you guys what we got going on here. Let's bring you a little bit closer, shall we? So, as you can see, the blend of materials is pretty reasonable. You know, I wouldn't say that it's too heavy on the straw, but I would say that the straw really, if we took it and pulled it all together and set it into segments in here, I believe the straw would be comprised of approximately 30% of the overall volume of the substrate inside of the bin. Now, I feel it through the glove, and it does feel like it's moist, but we're going to go ahead and do a quick squeeze test for field capacity. I can feel moisture, but it's not quite enough. So we're going to go ahead and add just a little bit. And how I'm going to do this is just like that. It seems a little extra, but I don't know. I don't want to dump it too much into one spot. You know, we may even have to add a little more than that, just given how much stuff there actually is inside of this container to work with. So, we'll mix it up again. And we'll grab a random handful. And looks like we need to add a little bit more. So, we're just going to go like so. Now remember, if you put too much water in your substrate, you can always add a little bit more vermiculite, or that would be a good time to like bring in the gypsum and throw in a half a cup of gypsum and start blending that around. So you can always add a little bit more ingredients to your sub mix in order to get the desired dryness level to a point. I mean, you know, if you end up dumping a whole ton of water in there, man, it's going to be a little bit of a bear to get that all blended in properly, but you can do it. It's always better to have slightly dry substrate that you add water to than have to have a wet substrate that you add other ingredients to get the water better distributed. So there we go. I think we're doing pretty good here. See, I can feel the water squishing underneath my fingers. So I'm going to go ahead and call this pretty well hydrated. The straw itself is collecting and holding moisture as well. So there we have it. That is the mix. Maybe it's a master's blend, maybe it's not. I'm not sure. But either way, that's what I'm going to go with. Now, here in a minute, coming soon, just so you guys are aware, I am going to be spawning some tubs. And the tubs that I'm going to be spawning are going to be side-by-side comparisons of my new mix with my old mix, because I always spawn in twos. So, for example, we got this bag of grain here that is fully colonized. We got a couple little holidays here in the bottom corners, but those are nothing to really worry about. This is Melmac Thrasher, and what I'm going to do with this is split it in two. And I'm going to put half the grain in one container and half the grain in another. And then I'm going to use the substrate from my old mix, my tried and true 3-ingredient mix, in one, and we're going to try the new substrate in the other. And we're going to grow them side by side to see just what happens when you tinker with the substrate. So I'm excited to do that. Looking forward to that. I'll bring you guys along with me while I get it done. But I think that for now, given the size of this project today and the video that I had to make because of it, I am just going to say, well, thanks for hanging out.